My only particularly lucrative source of income is currently Uber driving. To be honest, I didn't resort to being an Uber driver till I nearly went broke. After college, I had to live with my parents because I had such poor luck finding a mechanical engineering job, and I didn't have enough money to spend on myself. The time I spent living with my parents, I lost hope that I was going to exit from under their roof in something other than a body bag. I've had at least one woman in the past hit on me because she was a single mother and thought I'd be able to take care of her son, when at the time I could barely take care of myself. Hello everyone, my name is John W. McConnell. I am the host of a podcast on Spotify called Authentic Christianity, and I currently make ends meet as an Uber driver. My past financially has been somewhat tumultuous. Money has had different meanings for me over the years, though it hasn't had a whole lot of, I guess you could say, significance in my daily life. That is to say, I don't think much about money until and unless I'm presented with a need to spend it. I guess the best way to put it is money has mostly been for me something that has occasionally worried me enough that I wasn't sure what to do, but mostly has just been a means to live within in order to get by. It's not like I've lost sleep over it or had GI troubles because of it, but the fact is, I live in a world that runs on money, and well, in that kind of world, if you don't keep up with the pace, you typically get trampled.
True. So that's interesting. And you opened by talking about your podcast. So congrats on that. But the name of the podcast itself gives it away that you are a religious person, right? It's fair to assume that, right? That religion plays an important role in your life. And that's very nice. But my question to you is, do you think money is evil?
No.
Okay.
Money is no more evil than any other possession, any other asset. In fact, the Bible doesn't even say money is evil. The closest thing it says is the love of money is the root of all evil.
Malicious.
And that's not even necessarily true. The truth is, if you get down to it, the root of all evil is actually selfishness.
Doesn't it?
But that's a story for another time. I, in fact, deal with that on my podcast in one of its episodes.
Sure, and I encourage viewers to go catch your podcast as well, particularly after the discussion today. So I'm glad that you have a balanced perspective, and I wanted to understand, because what I've seen is sometimes, and in my thinking, it can even be a mistaken belief, is that some people have a disdain for money. And like you said, and like everyone knows, we can't live in this world without it. So it creates a conflict that's very difficult to resolve, right? On one side, you don't like money, or you think that money is cause of all issues, but you are forced to go after money because that's just needed for survival, right? And that conflict troubles them, doesn't allow them to live a good life, and they have monetary issues as well. So I just wanted to understand, as a religious person, what's your perspective on it. That's interesting. Very nice. So yeah, you have something to add, John?
Well, the thing of it is, as you know, people's perspectives on money vary wildly. When it comes to people disdaining money, quite often the reason they disdain it is ultimately because, I hate to say this because it sounds kind of vacuous, but ultimately the reason they disdain it is either because they don't have it, or they do have it and it can't buy them what they ultimately want. But the thing of it is, like I said earlier, money fundamentally is just an asset. It is different than solid assets, of course, but it is ultimately just an asset. The only time it becomes something more is when people add to it. Now, it's a lot easier to add to money than solid assets just because of liquid assets usability. But as I've demonstrated with my own life, it's only when you add value to money that it doesn't have that it becomes something more.
Okay.
It's only when you
Mhm.
you either have to deify it or to demonize it for it to be something more than an asset you ultimately don't take with you when you die.
Right. Right. No, that's very true. And you said that you have, uh, I don't know how, but we will figure out during the course of our conversation how you exemplify that in your own life. So what are you doing now for money, John? Like, how do you make ends meet now?
My only particularly lucrative source of income is currently Uber driving. I used to DoorDash for a living. Prior to that, I worked as an engineer until I was laid off due to lack of work caused by the pandemic.
You are one of those individuals you're saying who lost full-time employment during pandemic and never sort of regained a full-time employment. And the issue is actually bigger than the
Yeah.
world thinks, because what has happened is post-pandemic, there is a slew of job offers like gig works, temporary work, not full employment. But there have been so many such opportunities, or companies have shifted to that mode of employment, that all we hear in news is employment is down, but nobody has dug deeper to see what kind of employment is on offer now. So you are here an example of somebody who suffered during pandemic and has, it will be fair to say, never regained a full-time employment after that.
Yes, although I should point out that it took me being self-employed to discover I actually prefer that. But yeah, basically what happened was when the government forced a shutdown, one, corporations discovered that they could get by without a lot of the roles they initially thought were indispensable, and the people who had filled those roles had an opportunity to get more qualified for another one, so when the opportunity rearose, they just didn't go back. So they ended up contracting out with people to fill the roles that they initially couldn't, and now you have what we have today.
Mm-hmm. No, that that definitely happened.
Basically, Sharan, it's just a change in the economy. Different jobs go into and out of fashion over the years just because of what people want to buy. And the fact is, after the pandemic, people weren't willing to go back to what they saw as dead-end jobs that they could only do because they weren't qualified to do anything else. Or rather, only did because they weren't qualified to do anything else. And ever since then, like I said, they just can't get people to fill them because nobody's willing to do it anymore. Used to be, once upon a time, everybody would be clamoring to do that because, among other things, college education and fancy titles just weren't a part of American culture. Now they are. And people want to guarantee that they are able to make ends meet.
Yeah. I just trying to probe you just a little bit more on what you said. I understand from the way you're presenting is that it's more of a choice. Given that new experience you had, you feel like what you're doing now, which is gig work instead of a full-time employment. You're saying it's more of a choice, right? It's not that you don't have an option or you're not finding a full-time employment. You like this better. Is it fair to say?
Not exactly. It is.
Okay.
It is a preference. But the main reason I resorted to this was because after I was laid off, I was not able to find work as an engineer again. And work as an engineer is largely what I'm educationally qualified to do.
So how much were you making as an engineer before you were laid off?
I was able to command about $74,000 a year pre-tax.
Okay, that's nice. And what about now when you're working full-time as a gig worker, which is an Uber driver? What would you say you're earning in a year? So you can tell me a monthly and we can extrapolate it.
I'd say about a quarter of what I made as an engineer.
Right.
but I'm able to make a living on it. And this is why I say, Sharan, that money is just an asset to me. It doesn't matter that I'm not making as much as I did before, as long as I'm able to live and able to avoid just living paycheck to paycheck. Because to be honest, I didn't resort to being an Uber driver till I nearly went broke. I was able to live off my savings for a while until I realized I wasn't going to be employed again as an engineer. Uh, I originally started into door dashing at a friend's suggestion and discovered that it wasn't like the minimum wage work I'd spent years trying to get out of, and realized I could run with it.
Okay. And that's excellent. So, see, ultimately, in some way, you are right that the amount that one needs to survive differs from person to person. So if somebody is spending 100,000 a year, for them, this 74,000 salary is not sufficient. They will struggle with it. But if somebody is more prudent or their lifestyle choices are different, the place they are staying different, right? Like in your case, and we'll find out what are you spending. But it's possible, theoretically at least, that a very small salary is enough and they still have a good, satisfying life. So theoretically, it's possible. Though I would want to understand that you are earning only 25% of your earlier salary, like a quarter of what you said earlier, which was 74K. That would technically put you lesser than what the federal government defines as the poverty line, right? So you will go below that in terms of your income, right? You may say that that's working for you, and we'll find out. But it's a very low income now. So I want to understand at what point you decided that you are no longer going to find a job and you need to figure out an alternative, right? You said you ran out of your savings. So what time was that like? How long did it take you?
Well, after I lost my engineering job, I was actually able to live on my savings for a couple of years. But due to my holding out, all I can really say there is I held out for an engineering position knowing that I would not be able to make ends meet reasonably if I tried doing minimum wage work, and I knew I couldn't bring myself to do it mentally because I'd done it before. I didn't like doing it when I was only qualified to do it, and I don't like doing it now.
But what trade was this? You said engineering, but which engineering?
I studied mechanical engineering in college.
Mechanical.
The job in this case was actually a systems engineering position. I worked for Collins Aerospace as a systems engineer. I'm not sure what you mean by a trade, but basically
no, I wanted to understand this only.
I lost my engineering job.
Let me tell you what I was asking. In terms of your trade, right? You were a system engineer working in airspace, and that's what I was trying to first understand. That I find it rather curious that you were not able to find another job if you really wanted after 2 years, because initially in pandemic there were no jobs, but after 2 years, a system engineer struggling to find a job, I find that very difficult to believe, honestly speaking, because people were quitting jobs and taking another jobs just a year ago, right? So job market was brimming with jobs, different kinds of jobs, but for a system engineer, shouldn't have been difficult. Unless it was your choice, like you said, you're not enjoying it, you're not necessarily looking to go back to it. That's a different thing.
Honestly, Sharan, it surprised me too. I had a hard enough time finding engineering work before I had experience as an engineer. And once I had it, I don't know. Part of the problem may have been that I was terminated on trumped up charges because of the fact that corporations will do that in order to discourage ex-employees from seeking unemployment. The reason I say I was laid off is because of the fact that I not only sought unemployment, but got it, and you're not eligible for unemployment if you are terminated as opposed to laid off. I guess the thing of it is, my ex-employer was spreading rumors about me that other companies picked up on, or perhaps I had my resume or something in the wrong format such that it never got read. But I was never given feedback and had no way other to proceed other than the best way I knew. And my guess would be, while it's possible I was doing something wrong over the years, a bug, if you will, a software bug that just never got properly addressed, I don't otherwise know why I wasn't hired.
Did you seek any help? Did you approach a recruitment agency, for example? Because clearly, like you said, you either had a problem with resume or you didn't know how to approach the companies. So did you acknowledge that problem? Did you seek any help?
I did. I was given help by the Iowa Workforce Development Office, which is in charge of unemployment. For the most part, they were just giving me, for the most part, Sharan, they acted like there just were no engineering opportunities available in my hometown, which if Collins Aerospace, which was the big engineering employer, was laying people off, would have made a lot of sense. But otherwise, either they acted like I just didn't have relevant experience or something.
Now, I don't want to continue kind of beating up on it, but in my opinion, what I've seen is at times these government agencies, sounds like it was an agency, a local agency, they may or may not give enough effort because that's the truth. They are doing a job and they're getting paid for either meeting their quotas or just doing their job. Private agencies, on the other hand, because their remunerations are based on, say, a recruiter's ability to find you a job, they really go all out and they would have probably helped you better. So if you want to go back at any point, my suggestion would be to try, even if it means spending some money, going out to a recruiter which has a more of a national base so that they look outside your hometown, and it may mean an offer which will require you to move, which you may or may not do, or it may mean a remote position, right? Things like that. So going to a private recruiter may help, would have helped, but it's water under the bridge, right? But you're saying 2 years into your unemployment, you decided that you cannot find employment and you cannot go on living with your savings, so you need to do something else, right?
Kind of. What happened was 2 years into my unemployment, I nearly ran out of money and realized I had to resort to something. So I resorted to what I initially thought would be a mimic of minimum wage work, which mentally, like I said, I couldn't bring myself to do. Hated it. Then I discovered that being self-employed was a lot freer than I'd anticipated, and for what I was doing, it was a lot easier. The thing of it is, Sharan, I was initially cautioned against self-employment because of the nature of its taxes and the supposed nature of what running a business is like. But when I was door dashing, for example, which is where I started, all I was doing was driving around to restaurants, both sit down and fast food, and making deliveries. My only expense was mileage, which I could relatively easily keep track of. And as a result, what I grossed in a week was what went into my bank account, and I could gross my rent in a week, which meant I wasn't living paycheck to paycheck. So I realized that I was doing better than minimum wage, and I ran with it.
Would you say you were making more with DoorDash than what you're making now with Uber?
No.
About the same?
Net taxable income is somewhat less with Uber because of how I'm paid. I actually had to resort to Uber because due to a minor car accident, my DoorDash account got deleted. And Uber was the one that took me on. But I have been able to make a consistent living with Uber, and I've discovered I prefer it when my cargo can get into and out of my car on its own.
That's an interesting way to put the difference. But with the DoorDash or that type of delivery service, you're saying they need an impeccable driving record. Is that how it is? Like you're in an accident and then they no longer allow you to do deliveries?
Yeah. If what basically happened was I backed into a parked car, did not see any damage, though admittedly it was night, so I wouldn't have been able to see much. And as a result, I didn't report it. They saw damage. The owner, that is, saw damage, reported it. And because of the police report, DoorDash claimed I violated contract. So they deactivated my account.
So that's a risk with gig. Admittedly, there are choices. So like how you shifted to another provider which was willing to take it. But that's something which is, again, a message for everyone who is doing gig or any sort of gig, right? It can be like you or somebody doing things over the internet. With platforms, you really need to be careful with their rules because they can make a decision whenever they want, right? So that's a risk that we carry. But at the same time, to be fair, like how you saw your own case, that risk we carry in an employment as well, right? Your employer can take a decision anytime they want, right? Or they may claim that you violated a company policy and terminate you. That happens all the time. So that's part of the game, and one has to be ready for it. Yeah. But I'm still curious. So when you're comparing DoorDash or even Uber and then saying that I'm not living paycheck to paycheck, you're basically comparing it with another option that you have now, which is to go for a minimum wage job. You are not necessarily comparing it with your 75K a year job.
That's correct. The fact is, and this is what I mean when I say that money is just an asset to me. I guess the best way to put it, Sharan, is that I'm not trying to accomplish a specific financial goal other than living a reasonably comfortable life. More than surviving. If I were surviving, I would just be living paycheck to paycheck. But this allows me enough that I can rebuild my savings, among other things. Because the thing of it is, well, mathematically, if I'm just living paycheck to paycheck, I'm just staying at the same level. With this, I am gradually building up what I lost. And admittedly, it doesn't happen as quickly as if, say, I were contracting as an engineer, which, depending on the circumstances, I may seek out doing. But it does allow me to live and to live comfortably, and I feel good about doing the job.
That's good. So let's look at some of the numbers. Since you said only a quarter, is it fair that you're making only, I don't know, 20K or a year or 25K a year? What do we say?
Taxable a little less than that. I'd probably be eligible for the earned income credit at my current taxable salary.
You would be, right?
Like I said, my expenses are... The thing to remember, Sharan, is that my expenses are all miles. They are not tangible dollars. As a result, what I gross is what I have at my disposal.
Okay. No, that is good. But still, you're saying, say, close to 20K, for example, you are bringing in. And at that level, you don't have business expenses, is what you're telling me, which is fair. And for taxes also, I don't see at this income you being required to really pay any real tax. So that is the money in your pocket, I agree. But I'm curious how you are living off of that amount. So what are your living expenses? What is your living situation? Do you own your house, rent it? How do you live?
I currently rent an apartment. Like I said, I'm able to gross my rent in a week, which means that I should point out, Sharan, I do technically have expenses, but like I said, they are not tangible dollars. They are miles that I will eventually put on a tax return. But I am able, with my gross income, to make my rent in about a week. So at 4 weeks a month, That means I have 4 times the amount I would need to rent, which means in addition to spending about $60 a month on groceries, 30 a month on electric, which is the only utility I have to pay in my current living situation, well, that and internet, which is about 50 a month, I'm able to build up my savings and, like I said, to avoid just living paycheck to paycheck.
So housing, you're saying what you pay about 500 a month? Is that what it is? Apartment? I was just kind of
Actually, roughly 700 a month.
700 a month. Okay. But still with your grocery and other things which you said, it comes only to about 1,000 a month as your absolute expenses that you need to do, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So you're right that
Yeah.
by keeping your, and groceries, I'm curious, $60 seems quite less for a month. But if you say you are managing in that, that means you're very prudent in what you buy and what you eat. And I'm assuming you cook at home and you don't necessarily eat outside, because eating out is a major expense that I
do.
see practically with everybody.
Yes, and that is one of my vices, especially when it was especially so when I DoorDashed for a living, less so when I Uber drive. But among other things, I only do that if I have cash on hand or genuinely disposable income on my debit cards. And as a result, I'm also able to be frugal there. For example, what is known as Quick Trip in Wisconsin and Quick Star in Iowa sells decently priced and reasonably good quality produce. So, among other things, I'm able to get a bunch of bananas for $1, which provides an adequate snack.
Healthy too. Much better than a burger.
Oh, yes.
Okay. So you are able to keep your expenses down. No, you said that you are frugal and you either don't eat out or you eat out very less so that you are able to control, like that vice is also under control, right? So you are spending about $1,000 a month on necessary expenses. What about your car though? Do you own the car or do you have a car payment? Because that did not get counted here.
My car is currently actually third hand. It wasn't particularly expensive. It was a 2013 Ford Escape sold to me for about $3,000. I'm still paying that down, but it was bought from family, so that does help with things.
So you have some flexibility there, but still, what is your car payment a month?
I don't have a monthly car payment. The contract is ultimately for a yearly. The thing of it is, since it was bought from family, part of it has been worked off in labor. The person I bought it from has had me pet sit for her on multiple occasions and credited what she would normally pay me for pet sitting to the balance owed on that.
That's a smart way of trying to pay off that debt. Good for you. But that also reminds me, I'm sure you're aware that there are pet sitting gigs also available, which can help you supplement your income.
I had considered pet sitting, but the thing to remember is that when you're self-employed, on your taxes, you have to fill out what I believe is now a Schedule 3. It used to be called a Schedule C. You have to fill out one Schedule 3 per income venture, which means I used to DoorDash, now I Uber. On my taxes this year, I'll have to fill out 2 Schedule 3s. If I were to start pet sitting as well or something else full-time, I'd have to fill out a Schedule 3 for that. Real quick, I should point out I used to practice tax returns for H&R Block, and I was only employed part-time there, so I couldn't afford to make a career out of it. But when I was doing it, the schedule for self-employment income was known as a Schedule C. So my initial instinct is to call it a Schedule C.
It's seldom the case that your effort towards tax filing would be more than the income that you'll make. So my suggestion would be, don't let that alone stop you from trying anything new.
Well, the other problem is I would not be able to do pet sitting potentially as a full-time gig, and I'm trying not to have multiple aspects of full-time employment or to try to juggle multiple jobs if I can help it. I mean, I can alternate between one and the other, but like I said, I'm trying to focus pretty much exclusively on becoming a master of one trade instead of a jack of all trades and a master of none.
Okay, well, that's fair. That's fair. See, the only thing you have to remember is that it also makes you a little bit of vulnerable. You have already had that experience with DoorDash where they deleted your account. So you need to be careful there that if you depend too much on something and you don't have alternative, right, which you feel fairly comfortable doing, then it may be a problem. So consider that aspect as well. But if it is working out well for you for now, that's fair. That's okay. Have you always been this frugal?
For several years now, yes. After college, I had to live with my parents because I had such poor luck finding a mechanical engineering job, and I didn't have enough money to spend on myself, so I really had no choice but to be frugal.
I see it as a recurring theme. You're saying that you post-college also you had struggle finding job, and now again you had a struggle once you lost your employment. Just I'm not saying you would not have done it, but this does call for some sort of soul searching. You have to think. I'm glad that you found something which you like, right? So, but where I'm trying to go or understand is that being frugal is great, and being able to lead a good life without necessarily requiring a lot of money, right? Is again great, and maybe your religious background helps you also to feel content and not really go after materialistic things all the time, which is also great. But somewhere I'm struggling to understand the lack of ambition, if I can be frank, right? Where you're saying I'm okay, what I'm doing is okay, I'm earning below poverty line, I'm great, and right, I don't see you even thinking. You say I don't need a second gig because I will have to file another tax form. So this lack of ambition might be hindering your financial growth. I'm only looking at financial growth. Now, it may or may not be important to you. So that's why I did not just announce it. I'm saying that that's where I have a bit of a struggle. That are you like telling yourself to be satisfied too easily? And is it really making you vulnerable to any financial stumble that may happen? It's life. Things can change. Things can happen. Right? So, do you ever worry about that?
Sharan, to answer your question, I generally don't worry at all. If I have a problem, I pray about it or otherwise try to solve it. But aside from my religion commanding me not to worry, worrying does not help at all. I'll tell you this. In order to have ambition, you have to have a goal you want to meet. Most of the goals I have in life, which are not financial, are goals that will not be met by me, among other things, trying to manage W-2 employment that would build up my savings a lot more lucratively. The fact is, the whole reason I stopped, the thing of it is, Sharan, when I was door dashing initially, I still sought W-2 employment. But then the more I was self-employed and experiencing the freedom of that, the more I started to dislike W-2 employment. And I realized that potentially it wasn't worth it to me even to build up my savings that way by going back to it, because all I would be doing is, well, Sharan, basically all I would be doing, I hate to put it like this because it's going to sound a little crass, all I would be doing was whoring myself to my employer. As my father once advised me, Most people think that when you're a W-2 employee, your job is simply to make your boss happy. That is quintessential prostitution, because what makes your boss happy could be anything. It could even be something unethical or even illegal. As a result, the only way I can bring myself to do that job is if I'm my own boss. So while I may feel the desire to contract as an engineer if something is available, it depends on whether or not I can be content when I do it. And you are right that I shouldn't have all my eggs in one basket. The thing of it is, if you try to make yourself a jack of all trades by having your eggs in multiple baskets, ultimately you make yourself a master of none and make yourself unqualified for, I guess you could say, anything other than minimal reputation and minimal consideration.
Yeah, that's one way of looking at it. And I was not, don't get me wrong, I was never suggesting that you absolutely have to go back working for a boss, right? Like the word that you use. You don't have to really do that. It's perfectly okay being self-employed. In fact, I prefer that too. I completely understand that controlling your own destiny gives you much more leverage, right? But the challenge, when I talk about aspiration or ambition, it was financial, and me seeing that you earning, say, $20,000 a year, you say, I don't need to do anything else. It can still be what you are doing, but saying that this are the 5 things I'm working on to see how I will increase my income, live a better life, right? That's where I was going to. May not be a full-time job, can be a gig or a business that you run yourself, right? But if you hesitate to pick up that second tax form or open something new, you'll never figure out that there are other ways also, which frankly you may enjoy more than what you're doing now. It's possible.
I fully agree, Sharan. I think I should tell you that in addition to the podcast, I try to do voice acting work, which is incidentally how I ended up a guest on your podcast. The thing of it is, though, ultimately trying to pursue money is pointless unless you have progeny or other family to whom you will pass it on once you die. I'm not so naive as to pretend I couldn't die tonight. I could well. I'm an Uber driver. This is one of the nights I will work, and I could well be in a fatal accident tonight. I don't know. Now, I don't live as if I'm going to die tomorrow. I couldn't live frugally if I did that. But my belief as a result of that is that there's no point in pursuing wealth unless you are working for someone else, because ultimately you won't be able to hang on. Even if you are able to play the stock market like the Monopoly guy, in the end, you're not going to live forever. And that money, if it's not passed on to a loved one, is just going to go to the state's treasury.
Correct. Very valid point. And you're right. Most of the time, the ambition or what you do financially is to try and give a better life to your loved ones. Right? That's the common motivation I see. So you're saying you don't, at least now, you don't have anybody that you feel like working for. You don't have a close family like wife, kids. Currently you don't have anything like that.
At the moment, no, I do not. And unless I find somebody unless I find somebody I love enough that I am motivated to do this, I'm okay with that. Because in American culture, people act like you need to have a lover, you need to have kids, you need to have a job, you need to be normal. And at some point, you got to break the trend or it's never going to get broken.
Yeah. Ultimately, it is what works for you as an individual. It goes both ways. don't do it just because society expects you to do it. And the other way to look at it is don't not do it just because everyone else is doing it. Right? Just don't oppose it just for the sake of it. So either way, it's fine. But if you don't mind me asking, did you have any past relationship which would have caused any anxiety or anything related to finance in the past?
The closest thing I had to that, Sharan, was the time I spent living with my parents. I will not go into detail on that just because their affairs are private compared to this podcast. But I lost hope that I was going, as I ended up putting it to myself, I lost hope that I was going to exit from under their roof in something other than a body bag.
Wow.
And I was not willing to try to live like that. Now, thankfully, God blessed me by giving me work. Admittedly, it wasn't quite in my field, but he gave me work that allowed me to move out, to move to a place I wanted to live, and to stay there a decent while. I'm living here to this day. But the thing of it is, I had the ability to live on my own. I just didn't have the means to do it. I didn't have the money to do it. I thought I had studied a salable field when I was in college, but I wasn't able to find local work in my field because where I was living was basically trying to die economically. And it stayed that way for years as my degree got older, and because of advances in computing technology, especially advances in design software, my degree got to be less and less relevant. I wish I were making that up. I am skilled in all the fundamentals of mechanical engineering, but most employers who are offering mechanical engineering work want people who are skilled in design software I've largely never even touched, and have no desire to buy just to be able to touch it because I'm not formally trained on it.
Yeah. No, I was just thinking of sort of moving on and changing the topic a little bit. I take it that before that, you made a profound statement. So I know you didn't want to go into details of what happened with your parents, but I'm assuming that the reason you said what you said was more related to mental issues and not something actual financial, which would have caused that, right? It must be like mental issues which must be causing that. Is that fair, at least, rather than a financial?
If you're referring to the body bag statement, that was entirely financial. I was of the impression that I was not going to be able to find work that I could bring myself to do to survive, and my only hope for a release was death. And thankfully, I was able to find it. God had to guide me to it, but I was able to find it, and I've run with it.
No, that's very painful to hear that somebody does his engineering, which is considered almost considered a sure shot way of earning a comfortable living, and then having to go through what you went through, like struggling finding a job, regardless of whatever you study, right? Which type of engineering, but it was engineering nevertheless. And your situations are unique to you, so obviously you know the details, but it's kind of shocking to know that somebody after studying engineering would have so much trouble finding a job that you felt like you are never going to make a living through a job, right? That is scary. So I'm glad that you at least came out of that. Let's switch gears a little bit, and I'll ask some questions, right? Just so that we can see a different perspective of where you are. So there is this concept, John, of anti-vision. So anti-vision is your vision where you are looking at something for future, and this is something which you absolutely don't want. Okay, that's why it's called anti-vision, right? Something which almost scares you, you really don't want. So what I want you to sort of visualize and share is, if I were to ask you what is your anti-vision related to money, like what is your nightmare about money? Given this unique perspective that you are bringing, you obviously are not too money-minded person, right? You are making a comfortable living, so you bring a very unique perspective. So I want to know, what is your money fear?
Honestly, probably the biggest fear I have about money is, I guess the best way to put it is being forced to survive at the expense of thriving. I don't know how willing I am to try to live, for example, as a homeless person. I know I am not willing to try to make a living doing work I can't bring myself to do, which includes most minimum wage work, because I've seen what the workers in those areas go through. Went through it myself when I was younger.
So you fear that situation where you have so less money that you are forced to make choices which otherwise you'll not make. So that will be kind of if you just have to do something just to survive, that's something which you really want to avoid, right? Okay. So that's
Exactly.
good to know. Okay. So a different question though. If money was not a problem, like it was not a constraint, say if you have an account which has unlimited supply of money, you can get whatever amount you want, right? Hypothetical, of course. Then what is that one thing that you'll want to spend maximum money on? It cannot be regular like food or this, that, but anything which is more of a desire, that if money was not a constraint, this is what I'll spend money on.
I'd buy and maintain a property, probably either in northern Wisconsin or probably Maine, and live there enjoying my environment.
Okay. So you aspire to own your own property and live in your own property, right?
If I had more experience, I probably would have stayed employed as an engineer, and honestly probably would not have been.
See, with money, you can either buy an asset, which you set, like how you want to buy a property. So you can buy an asset and enjoy that asset. Or many a times people answer that I will use money to get experience, right? Like I'll travel around the world, or I will go do this. I will eat in a big restaurant or whatever. I'll go vacation in Paris. So that's what I was talking about. Like more than experiences, you think you need to have some asset. That is what you'll prioritize. Is that fair? Or you have an experience also in mind?
Yeah. The experience would be where I'd live. I'd like the idea of living in either of those places. I've never gotten to. And more than just going there once and going back to forget about it ultimately, I'd like to be able to go there to stay. So hence the purchase of the property and the maintaining of it. Well, I think I should tell you, if I had unlimited funds, I would probably customize the property as my whims dictated, which kind of leaves to the imagination how it would ultimately look. But the first thing to do would be to secure the property in the area I wanted to visit, or rather to live.
Nice. Okay. In recent times, like the last couple of years, what is that one thing where for which you would have spent maximum amount of money? Can you think of anything where what was your biggest purchase?
Definitely my latest car. It was not done on a whim. I managed to kill my last car when I managed to put a crack in its transmission that couldn't even be patched. So I consider myself blessed that I was able to buy the one I did from the family I did. But definitely automotive expenses have been my major purchases over the years.
So that 2013 Ford Escape is your biggest purchase, at least in the recent time. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
So, John, I understand that currently you are single, but kind of this question is about a potential partner, right? But from the financial lens. So it has two components. One is that have financials played any part, right? Your worry about how your financials will play out or how the other person will behave. based on either your past experience or what you have seen around you. Have those been any factor in you deciding to stay single? That's one part. And if they are not, then the second part is, if potentially you look for a partner, how important are their thoughts about finances or their thinking around finances?
Well, honestly, what's mainly contributed to my staying single is only a select few people showing any interest in me, and in doing so, potentially doing so for the wrong reasons, namely money. I've had at least one woman in the past hit on me because she was a single mother and thought I'd be able to take care of her son, when at the time I could barely take care of myself. But with regard to finances, I do not want a spouse who is looking for a caregiver, or worse, a sugar daddy. Because, to say the least, right now, I can't afford to be one, and more importantly, I don't want to be valued simply instrumentally. I don't want to be valued just for what I can give them in terms of finances. I want to be valued intrinsically. I want to be loved. And as a result, I try to look for partners who are reasonably independent and who are looking for love themselves.
Do you have any questions for me? Anywhere where I can help or provide any suggestion?
No, I think you've given good advice so far. Thank you for that. Honestly, I think I should address your viewers. Chase your dreams. Everybody who's watching this, chase your dreams, but only chase your dreams. Don't chase society's dreams. Don't avoid your dreams because of society. Chase your dreams and do what's necessary within ethical bounds to accomplish your dreams. Don't worry about whether or not it's good enough for someone else. Concern yourself with whether or not it's good enough for you. I'm a shining example of doing what's good enough for me. I don't live paycheck to paycheck, and I do what ultimately makes me happy. And that's what matters. I urge you all, obviously, to take care of those you love and who are your responsibility. But beyond that, pursue and try to find what makes you happy, not what makes them or someone else happy.
Very powerful. And rightly said. I agree with you. Chase your dream, and the life that you want to create for yourself is yours alone. So if you allow others to dictate what you should do, you'll live a miserable life. Exactly. Okay, great. John, it was fun talking to you. I appreciate you taking time and coming on the call. I wish you all the best.
Well, thank you for having me, sir. I wish you as well. Hopefully this episode gets plenty of views.
I wish to. Thank you.